We write Python programs in text files, and you could just use a simple text editor like WordPad or Notepad, and these are files which have a .py file extension. So an ordinary text file will have a text txt extension, a Word file will have a doc extension or docx extension, and so on. Well, Python files have a .py extension, and this tells the computer what kind of file it is. So I've got a directory here, which essentially is a copy of that web directory that I showed you on my website. And here are some of the programs. You can have a look at the programs. So we've got a series of Python programs, average, cube, exp, and so on, which we'll come to. And the very first program is program 1. What's in program 1? We can open this with a text editor. There we go. There's just 4 lines in that program, and it's a very elementary program. Let's make that a bit larger. It sets the variable x to be 8, sets the variable y to be 9, and does this computation of the average, so x plus y divided by 2, and prints the result. To print out an integer in Python, we actually have to convert it into a string by writing string z. And the print instruction does what it says. It prints it to the console. So what do we expect if we run this program? We run the program by typing Python program1.py. So the Python interpreter, Python, applied to Python program1.py, and the answer is 8.5, which is the average of 8 and 9, naturally enough. So that's a program, not a particularly useful program because it only does the one thing, but that is a running program. There's another kind of division here, and you can see in this text I've used this double line. What's the difference? Well, that double line is used to divide integers, and if I, rather than ordinary arithmetic division that you would see in typical computations, you can actually use this double divide, and which is used to produce integer results. So make a change to the program, save the file, and then run it again. And now we get the answer 8, because the answer must be an integer, and in fact we get the integer part of the previous answer, in other words 8, completely discarding the 0.5. Well, that process is exactly what we do in programming. We edit a file, and we run the file. We see if the result is what we expected. If the result isn't what we expected, then we change the program. And maybe I really did want to have arithmetic division, normal division, in which case, when I run the program again, I get 8.5. So usually what we do then is keep this text file open, and we have the command window, and we run the program. And that's what programming is about. Well, that's the process anyway. So that's what it looks like, running in a command window on Windows. Well, to get started, you open the Windows console. You can find this on the start option of of a Windows PC, and similarly you can get a console in Linux and in Mac OS. So in that console, make sure you're in the directory where the programs are stored. In this case it's called CLL Python. It's the same name in fact as the web directory where they've come from. And run the program. Python program1.py. Notice that the Python is lowercase. Now that program takes in a value. I actually have different values here, but I can easily change that. So 203 1965, so that my program corresponds to the program that you have there. 203 1965. We run it and we get 1084. So that's computing an average. Now, a program in a file, name.py, can have any number of statements written on successive lines, and it's useful to give a program a meaningful name. Our program there, called program1, doesn't tell you anything about what it does. It would actually be better to call it average, and I have done that with a slightly different version of the program there called average. Program statements, as we described, they're following one after the other in the order in which they're going to be executed. X equals 203 means introduce an integer variable called x, or introduce a numeric variable called x and assign the value 203 to it, and z being x plus y divided by 2, introduce an integer variable called z and assign x plus y divided by 2 to it. So try changing those values. Look at this Python program and try editing it and rerunning it and see if the behavior is what you expect. Now, of course, a more useful program is one that actually reads inputs from a user and allows you to change the values on each run. I'm just going to present that program at the moment, and I'll explain it next week, but we can run it. That is now the program average.py. It reads a value and it prints a value. Now, in fact, this is not doing the average, because if we look at the code, we can see that average.py is actually doing something else. Average.py is doing the product. So it's a bit misleading to call it average. If we want to do the average, then we need to do this, x plus y divided by 2. And now, if we go into 2 and 6, and we get the average, which is 4. So not only programs should have meaningful names, but their names should actually correspond to what they do, rather than being misleading, which would be even worse than having no name at all. Okay, so in this week, in this session, we've covered the basics of what is a program, how to get Python and Python textbooks and the examples, and how to run a program. Next week we'll look at more statements and more complicated types of processing that you can do with Python.